So I prefer Zoom, the layout of it. Okay, so welcome everybody to episode 7 of Happiness in Humans Live. We are just restarting it this year, a little late into January, but it's good to be back. And I know that there's a couple new faces on here, and usually we kind of just kick off with introducing ourselves just so we can get to know each other. So I'll go with Marco up in the top corner for me first. I know you say your name says Sophie at the moment, but that's
yeah, I saw it.
But yeah, if you could just introduce who you are and what makes you happy.
Yeah, well, I'm Marco van Onsen. I'm from the Netherlands, 31 years old. I'm the co-founder of Sound and Solid. One part of our company and my responsibility is that we organize online events with topics like happiness and remote work and connection and employee engagement. And bringing all those people together in an online event with expert speakers and world top speakers makes me really happy.
Thanks, Marco. Claire, I'll go with you next.
Cool. So I'm Claire. I work at Career Path Network. So we work in the graduate jobs and careers market with different clients and universities. I am head of people there, so I do anything and everything to do with people, and we're based, we've always had a very flexible working culture, and we're based throughout the country as well. So yeah, it's remote working, that whole concept's quite familiar for us. What makes me happy, well, anybody heard me there, sunshine, clearly, light, and gigs and music, which is obviously lacking at the moment too, but at the moment I am using this to I'm rediscovering loads of bands and stuff I used to listen to, so
that's cool.
That's kind of my happiness at the moment. So
I love that, Claire. I'm very much into gigs as well and music.
Yeah.
So feel free to send me any bands that you're listening to at the moment. I'm always listening to music all day. It makes me really happy.
Yeah, I think I'm back right now pretending like I'm 21-year-old me at university those bands, which is great. So
I was listening to a little bit of Blink-182 yesterday.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Claire. Sophie, you're up next.
Hello, and just to follow on from that, yeah, I'm in my room that has now been changed to the guest room from that I grew up in, and I used to have like lyrics all over the wall and stuff like that. I've just been listening to Linkin Park, actually, yeah, reliving my youth as well. So I'm head of people at Digital Theatre. We're an online education technology platform. And yeah, I also do all things people. And what makes me happy? Food.
Yeah.
Food makes me happy. Yeah, good food. I'm about to order. It's 4 hours ahead here, so I'm about to order my dinner after this delivery.
Very nice. Quick question: what is your favorite kind of food?
Probably French cuisine just in general, but I do love Arabic food as well. Represent and like Lebanese food. Delicious.
Very nice. Great, thank you, Sophie. Joe, you're up next.
Hello everybody, so I'm Joe. I'm the chief storyteller at the Happiness Index. So I do content branding and graphic design and stuff, and all the good happiness bits have been taken now. Food, music, sunshine. I mean, that is what makes me happy. And I too have been like getting pretty nostalgic with music recently and listening to like Strokes and Kings of Leon and stuff. So same for me, like uni days.
Very nice.
That makes me, and exercise recently. I've got into running.
Biking.
So. Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. Cycling too. I do a lot of cycling. Rosie's seen me spamming about it.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Lisa, hi, welcome to Happiness in Humans. I know you just kind of walked in or jumped in on our introduction. So if you could just quickly introduce yourself and what makes you happy.
Yeah, hi, sorry for being late.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm Lisa. I'm the head of people at Fircroft College at the moment, but I've just also set up my own business, Limelight People Group. So I'm on the precipice of falling into self-employment, which is a little bit scary in the middle of a pandemic. And what makes me really happy at the moment is my little kittens, who are so fluffy. I think you can probably see them there behind me.
Oh,
They're just the best antidepressant there is. You just have to like sniff one of them and they just make you so happy.
Thank you, Lisa. I was living with a friend when I went back home recently, and she has a few pets, and her cat was very fun to play with, the laser pointer. That was really good stress relief during my day. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for your introductions. And last but not least, Stephen, I'd like to just ask you, we'll kick off and start with the questions, but first, could you introduce yourself, what you do, and what makes you happy?
Yeah, hi everyone. Yes, so I'm Steve Hargreaves. I was 48 yesterday, so my music tastes are just a little bit older. So I've been reimagining the mid 80s, and that's made me quite nostalgic and quite happy over recent times. So I'm a dad to Geraldine and 2 kids, and I live on the North Somerset coast, which is actually really, really nice. About a 10-minute walk from the sea. What makes me happy, I mean, I love where I live. What makes me happy is walks by the sea. There's a spot in South Devon in Hope Cove called Hope Cove, and that's the place where as a family we're most happy. That's the place where we go to kind of disconnect from the world and reconnect with each other, and we've not been able to go there for 12 months. So currently what makes me happy is Saturdays, because Saturdays is no more homeschooling. So Saturdays for the first time have become like the happiest thing. So that's when we can have some time to each other, where I can write a bit of the book, try and get in some flow, and that relentless schedule of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, which the kids are in at the moment, doesn't happen. So at the moment, what makes me happy is Saturdays. And I, like Lisa, about 8 months ago, I left employment to set up my company, which has been something I've been wanting to do for a couple of years, which is the Compassionate Leadership Company. So I've been 8 months in. I feel like I should celebrate, which is why I've always got party poppers on my desk. Any opportunity to pull a party popper, like a client wants me to do some work, that's a party popper moment at the moment. So that also makes me happy.
That's great. Thank you, Stephen. I think I know that most of you know Matt Phelan, our co-founder, has also written a book during lockdown and the past few months. So I think right now is a really good time to be able to get that free space to be able to write about what you're passionate about. And thank you so much for joining on Happiness in Humans today. I really appreciate you being our guest star. I wanted to start off with the first question. Your company is all about compassionate leadership. So why is compassion so important to you?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Well, I think for me, and why I wanted to focus on this area of compassion, is because I've had a really eclectic career, work history, which ranges from sort of street theatre in Amsterdam, where I tried to ride a unicycle, but I was the worst unicyclist. I could just go in a straight line, so I could only do right angle unicycling. It was awful.
How did you get into unicycling?
Well, I didn't have a great Simon Sinek's Find Your Why. I didn't have a why. I didn't have much of a purpose from my late teens to my sort of mid-20s. So I just kind of went on a bit of a let's go wherever the wind blows. And so I had all sorts of jobs from, I was a deckhand on boats in the south of France, but I knew nothing about boats at all, not a thing. Marquee erector, care worker. And it was when I did some voluntary work as a care worker where I think experiencing compassion really hit me, that there was the logistics and the practical application of care, you know, the things we need to do to keep that person well physically. But what I'd never really experienced and observed was just the impact that kindness and empathy and listening, which seems obvious to say, doesn't it? But I think seeing it up close and personal and seeing the impact on people's well-being and the legacy that left with them was so important. And that piece of volunteering work led me to train as a social worker. And that's when I found my vocation, really. And then having spent some years in social work, in child protection, and then older people's services, I wasn't on the front line for very long, but really experiencing both ends of compassion, experiencing, for all sorts of reasons, people that weren't experiencing kindness, weren't experiencing compassion to any degree. It was really absent from their life. And how, when compassion was shown to them, how that can move things forward. And it just really sparked a huge interest in that whole aspect of how we feel is so important. And I think then a career then began 16, 17 years ago in kind of management and leadership in the public sector, and then the third sector. And the job before I left was I was a director with a national charity. So I think all the jobs I've had, I've been attracted to the purpose of that organisation being to give care, to give support. That the end product is very purposeful. So I think I've been around that whole area of care and support for so long, it really led to a real interest around leadership and organisational development, which was how can we reduce some of the barriers and the things that get in the way of organisations working in a more compassionate way. Because my fundamental belief is that leadership is about relationships. So for me, when do our relationships flourish? What are the qualities and the experiences that help relationships flourish? And I think that's in many ways encapsulated through compassion. And I think we all care about compassion. Mm-hmm. A long-winded answer, but it's what has really driven me, because the legacy that compassion leaves with people is significant. And the more that we are compassionate, the more we're inclined to be compassionate. Mm-hmm. And the benefits of compassion are huge. And I know we might touch on that in terms of the workplace.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's that for me. So professionally and personally, wanting to see how we can reduce barriers to compassion, particularly in the workplace.
It's really interesting to hear how your background leading up to today has brought you to wanting to even start a business fully around compassion and making focus on compassionate leadership, especially. I really liked that bit about the unicycle too. I wonder if if you're still able to ride a unicycle to this day.
Yeah, in a straight line, I can. Yeah. So that's the problem. Only in a straight line, and then I fall off.
Hey, it's better than I probably could do. So now you did mention that compassion in the workplace is something that you focus on, especially with leadership. So I'd like to ask, what is it about compassion in the workplace that's so important, and why it should matter to us?
Yeah, and I think some things around that. What is our understanding of compassion? Is it the same as empathy? Is it the same as sympathy? Why is it important in work? And I think, so for me, compassion comes about when we notice and are moved by other people's suffering, and we want to prevent it or alleviate it in some way. So I think like a fundamental description of compassion would be about that. We see people suffering, we experience people suffering, we want to do something about it. Whereas empathy, which is obviously hugely important, much more associated with I'm walking in your shoes. I'm wanting to listen to understand how you might feel, and I can relate to that feeling, and that's really, really important. I think with compassion, it takes that too, and I'm compelled to meaningful action. I think that's really important, and I think that's a difference for me. So I think empathy can lead to a certain feeling, and that can lead to a compassionate act. And I think in the workplace very much now, and you don't have to go very far, I think, to see the research or to even go on LinkedIn, people are talking, and they all use kind of different words, but I think a lot of our employees, a lot of our people are wanting to experience, and we hear this a lot, authenticity. I want to be more of myself at work. I want my leaders to drop their mask a little and be a bit more willing to be vulnerable. I want to feel included. I want to belong rather than fit in. And I think that's really important. I think there's a really significant difference between people and employees that need to modify their behaviour to fit in, which is very different from I'm seen for who I am and valued for that. So I think people are thinking, well, how do I feel like I belong? I think trust is an issue within organisations at the moment, and we want to feel that we trust our leaders and our organisations. And people use the word of dignity, empathy, respect, courage. We want psychologically safe workplaces. I mean, the words are all out there, and I'm sure you'll be really familiar with many of those terms. And I think, you know, not that many years ago, I don't know about your experience, but mine was, they weren't words that were often used talking about organisational culture. They weren't words that were in the narrative to a huge degree, and I think they are now. And I think we want to see organisational behaviour aligned with the values. And
oh, internet cut out. He warned me this might happen before we started. Might give it a second. Let's see. Hopefully he can come back.
Like a game show, Rosie. Do we just have to finish the sentence?
I know. Anybody? Any ideas? I'm sure I'll come back in a minute. We'll just hang out for a bit. Lisa, are you do you know Stephen?
So no, Steve and I have actually got a call booked in on Monday to talk about like-minded interests.
Okay.
So the business that I'm setting up is very, very similar to what Stephen was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
A lot with equality, diversity and inclusion.
Okay.
So really kind of similar points that we'll be working on. And
right.
The work that I've done at Faircroft has really had, I mean, we've won awards for kind of increasing engagement, increasing trust.
Mm-hmm.
We're finalists for CIPD and HR excellence. So we've done some really great work on values-led transformation.
Yeah.
So it's all kind of, like Steve said, it's the words that you didn't used to hear, and now, you know, it's where every company's kind of trying to get to different stages.
Definitely. Yeah, I've been very lucky in like my career so far. This working with the Happiness Index is kind of my first start in my professional career, and very, very lucky that we, like, our values are like everybody's treated like a human, not a number, and that we're able to have freedom to be ourselves at work. But it's definitely something that especially in the last year, we're seeing those big words more often, like that trust, authenticity and whatnot that Stephen was talking about. And we also had, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Natasha Wallace from Conscious Works. Steve did some work with her on, and some others, on a research project about conscious leadership, and it's all around compassion and empathy and whatnot. I can share the link with you to find the report, but she was on the show as well, kind of talking about something similar. But it's all just really interesting stuff to hear about. Hopefully he can try to join back on and we can continue the conversation.
Well, the spin that I always put on it is a lot of the initiatives about compassion and about happiness, unless you're kind of truly inclusive, you might be compassionate and happiness and happy for like a certain group of people, but it might not be felt equally among everybody. So I think inclusion's a really important conversation to be having at the same time as that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. I've never really heard that part of it before, you know, the inclusion piece.
I went to a neurodiversity seminar, and they were talking about this tribalistic, you know, like we've all got this caveman mentality in the back of our heads. And they were saying that when you feel like you're part of the tribe, you know, you feel secure and you feel safe and you can be yourself and you can bring yourself. But if you feel like you're not a part of that tribe, like you're an outsider, you get that fight, flight, you know, and those stress hormones releasing.
Right.
I always thought that.
Hello again.
Hey.
Shut up.
We were just carrying on the conversation.
No, great. I mean, the kids weren't even online, so I don't know what happened there.
Well, we're glad to have you back.
Yeah. No, I was just really making the point that I think from a workplace perspective, I think more and more we're hearing about the need for strong relationships in the workplace and a more relational approach to leadership. So I think that's hugely important, and I think compassion and all the aspects of compassion really help that. And I think also the impact and compassion around productivity, well-being, engagement, trust, absence, retention, inclusion. There is mountains and mountains of research out there into how those relate to how compassion and empathy relates to people feeling included, productivity, the bottom line. You know, it's not as if there's an absence of really robust research around how these more relational parts of being part of an organisation impact. And I think that there's something about moving it away from this idea that compassion is some sort of soft or nice to have, that, you know, we'll kind of get round to that when things aren't quite so hectic. And I think for me, it's trying to reposition that as going, you know, the relational aspect of the organisation and the organisational culture is what's going to get you through. And I think COVID is so important in terms of what legacy that will leave in organisations, because it's incredibly difficult at the moment. So I think it needs to matter to us, because if we care about the bottom line, if we care about engagement, if we care about well-being, then we need to care about compassion. I certainly assert that anyway.
Yeah. I think, and I'm seeing a lot of nods on here as well. I think many of us on this webinar right now agree with that. What kind of impact do you think that compassion can have on a world like today, in the working world? I know we've been through a lot in the past year, and a lot of people are coming to terms more with the idea of bringing empathy and emotions and compassion into the workplace. But down the line, what do you think the impact will be?
Yeah, so I think if we look at it from an employee suffering perspective, and I use that word deliberately, suffering, undoubtedly, you know, employee suffering within an organisation incurs considerable financial, psychological and social costs of that organisation. So I think there's something about, with an understandable short-term view, you know, we're trying to get through, aren't we? Many organisations, it's just trying to get through the day, through the week, through the next quarter. And that's understandable. But if that short-term view continues over the medium and long term, the impact of that can be really significant. When things begin to settle into something more normative, it's what legacy is that period of short-term thinking, short-term practice going to lead to. And I think part of that is there are friends and enemies of compassion. And I quite like that phrase. So the enemies to compassion are very much people feeling overwhelmed or overworked or overloaded. If there's a blame culture in the organisation, if there's a continual focus on short-term performance and productivity, if there's a culture of emotional suppression, and by that I mean, you may have heard this, I certainly did when I first came into work, you know, work isn't the place for emotions, Steve. You need to keep all of that outside of work, you know. And I don't think that was meant with a bad intent. I understand what the meaning was behind that, but I don't know about you. I feel things all day long, you know, sometimes really good things, sometimes not so good things, sometimes really weird things, you know, but I'm feeling emotions and feelings all day long, and I don't compartmentalize them. And I think the point is, you know, the workplace isn't therapy, it's not counselling. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is, if I'm to be seen and valued as a real life human being, then that's the whole of me, and I bring the whole of me to the workplace. And whilst I've got my work face on, my mask, if you like, if that mask is so rigid and so thick, and I'm never prepared to drop it and reveal it, then I might struggle to be seen and accepted for who I am, which is something I want to be. So there are enemies of compassion, and there are friends, you know, they're friends of compassion, you know, empathy and self-compassion, which is just so important. I think, you know, we know that if people are inclined to be kind to themselves, they're far more inclined to be kind and compassionate to others, Rosie.
Right. Yep. That's something too that I know, like at the Happiness Index, we do a lot with engagement, but we're also trying to bring happiness into that as well. And because we're not just thinking all the time, we're also feeling, because we're human. So having that compassion piece is so important. So next I'd like to move on to, we've talked a lot about what you do. How do you do it? How do you work with people who are coming to you asking, how can I bring more compassion to the workplace? How do you start that process?
Yeah, because that's the answer to the so what question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what, Steve? Yeah, thanks very much for that. But how am I going to make that a reality? So there are a couple of things about that. So you might be able to see in the background the wheel. There we are, the wheel of. So I've because you've got to have a model, haven't we? Everybody's got to have a model. So for me, I call that the 360 degrees of workplace compassion. And when I talk about compassion, I've tried to answer that so what question to what do I believe compassionate leadership or compassion in the workplace looks like? Because I think it's really important to describe that in a way that is meaningful. I mean, I'm an operational person by background. My leadership career is in frontline operational services. So, you know, I'm interested in how you make the connection between that and something operational. So in my wheel, I've got courage, empathy, integrity, respect, fairness, humility, attention, and self-compassion. And the approach that I've been taking with people, whether it's one-to-one coaching or team work or some consultancy, is how can we bring those things to life in the organization? How can we awaken the conversation around compassion? So I've tried to, in the first instance, identify it. What are the qualities and the characteristics of the compassionate leader, the compassionate team? What do we want to see and experience being part of this organization? And if this resonates, and if the organization or the leader can see the connection between that and productivity and performance, because I think it's really important to make that connection, then it comes down to, okay, so how? What are the things that help or hinder the organization to be more or less compassionate? And there was a great piece of research done by the Roffey Park Leadership Institute, and they split it into 3 areas. So there's organizational culture, there's individual circumstances, and there's policy and procedures. And they're the things that can help or hinder a more compassionate working environment, and an environment where leaders might feel more inclined to put the focus on relationships rather than merely managing performance through the systems and processes. You know, organizations need the systems and processes. It needs a robust business plan. It needs a strategy. We need leaders to be competent in those areas. Of course we do, they're vital. But so many of the messy, ambiguous challenges there are in leadership are about the people stuff. You know, you'll know this, you know, we have to jump into the people stuff, you know, and that can be a bit messy, but it can also be wonderful. So I think it's identifying with the leader, the team, and the organization what gets in the way. An example being in policies and procedures, is there a culture of when policies and procedures are followed, they're followed to the letter, to the point where you can't see the real compassionate person. There's no moving away from that depending on the context and circumstances. So the policies almost become too restrictive to adapt to individual circumstances. And that's not a criticism. You know, I've worked in an organisation for many years. It's just actually, have they inadvertently become a problem? Can our leaders and our teams respond to each other in what we might describe as a more compassionate way? Or are they really constrained by the system they need to work in? Organisational culture, you know, do managers and leaders not feel empowered to make decisions themselves and to lead with more compassion? You know, what are the norms? Do the senior management go, you don't want any of that stuff, that's soft HRE, L&D stuff, we haven't got time for that, we've got to hit the budget this month. So, you know, is there a culture of actually, you know, this isn't that important? And then individual circumstances, you know, do individual leaders and managers, you know, believe in it? Are people too busy to stop and to see the human being in front of them? Is there a low or a high level of emotional intelligence across teams and leadership? Are people fearful? Is there a culture of fear and blame in the organisation? So there are things that can help or hinder, and I tend to find a lot of my work is at a leadership, team and organisational level, trying to identify those things, but do it in a kind way. We're not trying to shame leaders, teams or organisations. We're trying to understand that this stuff can be challenging and difficult, but it ultimately can lead to some quite liberating aspects of culture.
Right. What do you say to those people who in your words, think it's soft HRE stuff, or like people who don't believe in what you're trying to share?
Yeah, I think it depends where that is coming from. If it's coming from show me the evidence,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I need to see the scientific evidence behind it, then there's a response there. There's an abundance of it. You know, if somebody's very open and just really wants to see that, that's fine. But if actually it's deep cynicism, you know, if it's really deep cynicism that, you know, that it's just, I don't believe you, I don't believe this, then there is a point of whether, well, this might not be the right match for you at the moment. And I don't mean that with any arrogance. I just mean, you know, there's only so far you can go in persuading the unpersuadable, isn't it? And
Mm-hmm.
you know, my job only goes so far in that respect. So I can present you with the evidence. I can have a conversation with you about it, and you know, we can do some testing out, can't we? Often it will be, well, why don't I just come and run a workshop?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just do, you know, let's put some feelers out there. Or it might be there's a particular problem that the organisation needs to solve that's come through their satisfaction survey or their pulse survey, or they're very high on grievances. And then it's about positioning this approach as to how that can help those reduce or alleviate. So I think to some extent it depends where they're coming from and why. And I think it's really reasonable to be challenged and people to expect a credible response. But I've learned from experience not to try and persuade those that are fundamentally opposed to the whole philosophy, because, you know, I don't know what you think, but I don't think I can do that. I think that's, you know, there needs to be something there.
Yeah, and I think having that research and that evidence to back up what you're saying too is something that really will in the end make a difference to some people, because like you say, there are some people who just aren't there yet, or that aren't really fully understanding of why it's so important to bring this kind of compassion and humanize the workplace, really.
Yeah, because it's about doing that in a non-judgmental way, isn't it? You know, you know, it's you know, if this doesn't feel the right fit for you, ever or for the moment, you know, whilst I might have a personal opinion that's different, and we might have a discussion about that. You know, I don't run the organisation, you do, and that's entirely your right to have that view. You know, because it might, you know, it might not be the right fit, and that's one of the things I've learned about setting up a business. You know, sometimes you're not the right fit, you know, either individually or your philosophy. But I think what I need to do is articulate my philosophy coherently to enable that person to make a judgment or not, really.
I'd like to get into that, Stephen. I know that you said at the beginning that you've just started this business last year, which must have been kind of a roller coaster during in the midst of a pandemic. So would you mind telling us how that's been, your successes, your highs and lows, anything you've learned?
Yeah, you speak to my wife when I first came home and said, I think this is the time. This is the time. This is the time. Yeah, I was just jotting some things down, actually, because I took the day off yesterday because it was my birthday, and I was just jotting a bit of reflection down.
Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you. And so I think for me, there's something about, I mean, I can only speak from my experience, but there was something about being bold but not reckless. And I think that's different for everybody. So my job wasn't at risk, and I had a job that I really enjoyed. I've been there for 8 years as a director, but for the last couple of years, I've been really wanting to, well, certainly by the time I was 50, I wanted to go freelance, and I knew this was what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it. So voluntary redundancy was offered to anybody in the organisation, and for the first week, I didn't think that was me. And then the letter came around again, and I thought, oh, that could be me then, couldn't it? Oh, right. You know, so then once I realised it could be me, I had to make a choice. And the choice was, you know, what would be a risky move? What would be a bold move? What would be reckless? And that was a family decision. So, and we decided it would be a bold move, but we would make that. And that I believed that how I wanted to spend my time at work and how I wanted to serve organisations, that it was the right time to do it. So there's something about purpose in there. But people will tell you that you're mad, that you're balmy, you definitely shouldn't do that. What on earth are you thinking about? And not everybody's supportive. And I think there's something about listening to the voices, but also, you know, really having the courage to have a go, I think. So that was the first thing. The second thing I realized was it was about making decisions every day. What I like about working for myself is I get to make all my own decisions, and that's great. What's really scary about it is I have to make all my own decisions.
Double-edged sword.
Depending on the day, that can energize me or really freak me out. So I really like that aspect. But what I have realized is I need to get up every day and make decisions. And I know that seems a bit obvious, but you know, I need to take action. I need to make decisions. And that's different from being busy, because one of the other things I realized was I've had to change my mindset from being an employee for all of my working life to being self-employed, and that's a very different mindset. And I'm still working through that, but you know, not sitting at the desk from 9 to 5, not feeling I have to be here waiting for the email, you know, and just adopting a very different approach to how I work, and that the temptation to be at my desk looking at my laptop for hours and hours and hours is there, but I have to really make sure that I don't do that. I can't will work to arrive just by staring at my screen, you know, and going, you know, is Claire going to commission me? Is Sophie going to commission me? Is Lisa going to commission me for that work? You know, I can't be in that space, because that's really de-energizing. And then I think learning from what's worked, what I've also found is I have to work out loud, and I have to be really generous. And I say that because I've experienced massive generosity from the LinkedIn network and colleagues who work out loud. And I've not been used to doing that, working in organizations that are quite political, and I realized, I didn't think I was, but I probably was quite guarded. So for me, I've realized I need to work in a very generous way, very open way, and I need to put my work out there. And it was Matt Phelan that said to me, Steve, you've got all these great ideas, but how on earth is anyone going to hear about them? You know, you've got to put your work out there. And that was a big step for me, whether that's LinkedIn, writing an article, doing a video, I've got to put my work out there, and fail fast and fail lightly, be kind to myself, because part of making decisions every day is I've got to try something that hasn't worked, move on. So learn from it, but carry those mistakes or things that didn't quite hit the mark lightly. We're not meant to be perfect, so I just have to have a go. Avoid comparison. So there are some days I have to be off LinkedIn because I'm making assessments of how busy colleagues might be, and I know that that's a very false. I mean, LinkedIn has been hugely generous to me, and I value it greatly. But there are times if I'm not feeling as positive as I need to be, I need to keep away from it. Because I'll make all sorts of judgments about, you know, oh, Joe, he looks like he's got loads of work at the moment. You know, I have no idea whether he does or he doesn't, but I just need to be wary of that. And that's no criticism of Joe. That's just about me being aware of how I am on that day. Connectivity, cliche, isn't it? Find your tribe. I think that's so important. And
absolutely, I can say that as community manager. That's
just very so important. And I can honestly say I've genuinely never felt more connected professionally than I have done since I stepped away from employment. Never have I felt so connected, and that's wonderful. And then saying no to work that's not aligned to your purpose. How hard is that when you need work that you might have to think about saying no to it? I haven't had that experience yet, but I know that might be there. So I think for me, it's about knowing what is good work and who are good people to work with. And I can't live in a naive bubble, but I have to know where my red lines are and where I'm going to do my best work and bring my best value, and be prepared to accept when that's not the case. And then don't panic. If there's no work coming in, panic, can't do it, because that just paralyzes you. And then don't
fight or flight mode too, when you're going into stressing out too much, and it just makes things worse.
Yeah, because it's not gonna. It distracts me from taking action, and that's what I need to do. Take action. not freak out. And then don't build your own website unless you really have to. And I had to build my website because I have no idea how to build a website, but I set myself a startup fund, and I ran out of that startup fund quite quickly. So I had to build my own website, and that meant I had to learn how to do that along the way. So whilst that's been a really interesting process, I wouldn't recommend that unless you had to. And then funny coasters, my wife buys me funny coasters just to keep me grounded, and they're usually quite disparaging. So a family,
Read it to us. What do they say?
Well, the first one she gave me was this: we've decided we'd like you to work from home, preferably for someone else. And then, right, Steve, what you bring to the table? I brought the biscuits.
Oh, they're personalized too.
Yeah, personalised. So that's just the thing that me and my family do. So my wife is very good at keeping me grounded, and I'm not saying that's for everyone, but it's just a reminder that they've got your back, they're supportive, but don't take yourself too seriously in the process. Because she also bought me the picture Dream Big at the same time when I was umming and ahhing about whether to go freelance. So
fine, yeah.
Sorry, I talked a lot there. Sorry.
No, it was, I asked. It's good to hear all that too. And I think a lot of the things you said too go back to that self-compassion thing and making sure that you're not too hard on yourself, and that you're because you make mistakes, it's okay. It's you learn from it and you keep moving forward after that. I have one last question for you. I know we're a little bit over time, but just one last question. Where do you see your business going in 5 years? Where do you hope to be?
Well, still here. How cliche is that as an answer? I'm still here, and still enjoying it, and still being challenged, and still feeling what I'm doing is of value. I suppose that's the broad brushstrokes. I'd like to have really delved into the model, because I'm beginning to roll that out with some teams and some leaders, and I've got my compassionate leadership development program starting maybe in March. I'm just I'll be going out and seeing if I want to do that in cohorts of 6 people from different organizations. I need to go and do some marketing around that. But I suppose what I'm saying is I really want to test out some of these things. So I really believe in them. They're evidence backed, and I think there's a real place for them. But of course, that's me coming at it from, I need to know what the market wants, and I need to see whether it's a good match. So I think there's something about in 5 years proving the credibility of this approach in a way that organizations can see the impact on the bottom line. I think that would be a wonderful thing to have achieved. But yeah, carrying on doing good work. But I think at the moment, as I look ahead, still being here in 5 years would be really cool.
That's the most important thing. That's a great answer. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Stephen. I really appreciate you coming on today, and best of luck with your business in the future moving forward, and your book. Hopefully we can, I'll get a copy of that when it comes out. And I guess thanks to everybody else for joining on Happiness and Humans today. We'll see you in a couple weeks' time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.